million. So if it was random, big deal. You know, you're just going to lose, some votes will spoil. But what I decided to do, because I used to actually teach statistics, got together with guys here at Harvard Law and at some other schools in the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and we went into the electoral dumpster, looked at those votes that were spoiled, and looked at where they came from. Where they came from. And it turns out not everyone's vote spoils equally. We took the votes that were spoiled in white precincts and we made a pile. And then we took votes that were spoiled in black precincts and we made a pile. In fact, and then I made a chart. The chance that your vote will spoil, not get counted for a technical reason, if you're African American, is 900% higher than if you're a white voter. 900% higher. If you're Hispanic, 500% higher than a white voter. If you're Native American, over 2,000% higher chance your vote will just go than if you're a pale face, okay? And believe me, that made the difference in those western states. In fact, in New Mexico, I see everyone's looking at, you went out to count chads?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's looking at Ohio and Florida, and I said, nah, that's what they want me to do. I went to New Mexico, where George Bush supposedly won by 5,998 votes, not counting 34,000 ballots in the garbage can. Cast not counted. Glitched, whatever. I went to check that out. Now, by the way, you do the arithmetic. Look at the demographics of number of black voters, Hispanic voters, Native American voters. You add it up, and of all the votes spoiled in the United States, of 3.6 million votes spoiled in the United States, 88% are cast out of precincts, are cast by voters of color. 88%. Tell me who won that election. Okay. Now, New Mexico won by Bush, supposedly 5,998 votes. And there were Native American precincts all over the West where there were 9 out of 10 voters didn't choose a president, didn't vote for president. I don't mean they didn't go in to vote. I mean that they drove their pickups across, and these are huge precincts, drove their pickups, whatever, to the voting station, to the polling station, went in, looked at the machine, looked at the choice and said, forget it, walked out and went home. 90% in many Native American precincts like Navajo Nation. That's what the machine said. So I flew to Taos Precinct 13, which is the Taos Pueblo, and I asked a guy whose title really is the War Chief. I said, okay, Chief, because I had asked, by the way, the Secretary of State of New Mexico, what happened to all these votes? And he said, well, you know, there's some people in some communities who just can't make up their minds. Okay. So I said to the chief, you Injuns can't make up your mind? And the war chief said, listen, white boy. No, he didn't. He's a polite guy. He said, Mr. Palast, we know how to pick a president, but we don't pick the voting machines. And then he said something really strange. He said, we trusted them. Okay. See, we don't give natives, the Native Americans, you know, blankets of smallpox anymore. We give them busted Shuptronic lever machines, okay, to vote on. Now, that's part. That's half, the glitch, the spoiled votes. There's a whole other set of votes that weren't counted. Almost double the non-count of 2000. Okay? And that was the provisional ballot. Now, what the heck is a provisional ballot? Do you remember in like Mrs. Gordon's civics class, you know, well, you know, you raise your hand and vote for president. No, Timmy, your vote's provisional. Where did this come from? I don't remember this. You know, I don't remember this provisional. It came from the Help America Vote Act. Now, let me back up. Provisional ballots are to a very minor extent my fault. See, back in 2000 in reporting for BBC and The Guardian, I did a story in which I discovered a couple of CD-ROM discs and from the office of Catherine Harris, which indicated that she had knocked off tens of thousands of voters because they were felons and they weren't allowed to vote in Florida. It turns out that 97% of these people were only guilty of voting while black. Okay? That was the election. The Congressional Black Caucus went crazy with this report. It started out when I got a call in London from a congresswoman, Cynthia McKinney, who said, I want to see that evidence. Brought it over, she played the tapes for the Black Caucus, and they literally marched across the Capitol and said, we want a law that says that if your name is scrubbed off a voter roll, you still get a chance to vote, then we'll check if you're a legal voter, and then your vote counts. And then something very sinister happened. Karl Rove said, great idea. Oh. And so our president signed the Help Americans Vote Act. Now, of course, when George Bush tells us he's going to help us vote, we should be a little bit cautious. He helped a lot of people vote. See, the Black Caucus thought, well, a few thousand people, maybe even 100,000 people nationwide would find their names missing or a problem, they get a provisional ballot. Election day 2004, over 3 million people were handed these provisional, back-of-the-bus, placebo, bogus ballots. And 1,090,000 were never counted, thrown away, rejected. Now, how did this happen? That's not all. Democrats especially panicked that the computers, the new computer voting machines, are going to snatch your vote. And there's something to that, believe me. Concerned about that, said, oh God, we can't trust these people. They're going to change, they're going to mess with my vote through the computers. So I don't trust my election supervisor, so I'll just mail him my ballot. Absentee, and the number of absentee ballots grew by 500%. And you trusted them. And 750,000 of those absentee ballots were never counted. That's the official numbers. Not counting the ones that somehow ended up behind the file cabinet. Okay. How did this happen? This massive rejection of provisional ballots, this massive rejection of absentee ballots, the creation of all these provisional ballots. Someone was doing something that hadn't been done for a half century in America, since the days of Jim Crow, a mass challenge of voters in every swing state. I didn't know how this was happening, but BBC put me on the case, and we were stumped as to what's going on. And suddenly, we get in my inbox at georgewbush.org, I get these emails from the top guys at the Republican National Committee. Let me explain. Hey, for 20 bucks, anyone can get a domain name. And for 20 bucks, a bunch of jokesters got georgewbush.org. Now, the top honchos of the Republican Party at the state committees and at the national level send their most confidential missives on georgewbush.com. If someone makes a mistake at all, either a dumb secretary who wants to make sure that she gets it wrong,